the Executive Director of Movement Voter Fund. And I'm going to be really quick because we all want to hear from our Minnesota organizers. So I'm going to go right into this is a 100% nonpartisan call. And you can intro yourself in the chat. You can say something you wish our government was spending money on instead of ICE. And I'm going to go through some quick housekeeping and we're going to get into it. So, first of all, we are co-hosting this gathering with our friends at Solid Air Network, who we love, who I'm going to pass it to in a moment. We're going to email the recording and the slides in 1 to 2 days. You can use Zoom's Q&A feature to ask questions. We're going to pause the chat during speakers so we can be present. And after the hour, we're going to have 30 minutes of optional office hours for deeper conversation and Q&A. Closed captioning is available via Zoom. And I just want to give one huge shout out to Laura Flynn, who is very involved with both Solid Air and Movement Voter Fund for years and is deep, deep in Minnesota organizing. And 2 weeks ago, kind of did a full court press with MVF and Solid Air to say, hey, you guys got to show up for Minnesota. And the request of her and other Minnesota organizers, we created a rapid response fund. Last Tuesday, we moved or put in motion $750,000 to 7 Minnesota organizations. And we are hoping in this call in this week to get Minnesota all the money it needs and to be able to pivot this new rapid response fund to all the places that need it from Maine to Arizona. And with that, I will pass it to Malachi Larbi Garza from Solid Air Network.
Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon. It's a real honor to be here. Thank you so much, Billy, for that introduction, and it is always a pleasure to be partnering. I'm the Strategy and Innovation Director at the Solid Air Network. Solid Air is the largest donor organizing network in U.S. history because we exemplify love in action. And we are so proud to be getting the backs of people who are seeking justice and seeking peace and are organizing in their daily lives. And so we have started the Movement Protection Fund, which you're going to hear more about today, to deploy funds rapidly to those who are feeding families, those who are showing up to protest, those are taking people to doctor's appointments, and they are being brutalized or arrested for that behavior. And so we started the Movement Protection Fund to get the backs of people, unlike anyone else can do in any other fund in this country. And so we are proud of our role. I'm so proud Kofi is with us here. Kofi Wade is going to speak more about that later. And what we are going to do is hear about what's happening on the ground in Minnesota from people who are there, who are working day in and nights and days and weekends to make sure that our people can be as safe as possible and that we can do the most effective work possible there. So I'm going to pass it to Laura Flynn, who's going to start us off in that direction, who's a beloved Solid Air board member, who's been a leader in the Movement Voter Fund and Movement Voter Project. And so we are just really excited to be sponsoring. Thank you, Movement Voter Fund, and thank you, yes, everyone who came today.
Thanks, Mal. Thanks, Billy. Thank you all for being here with us today. You guys have our back and we feel it. And it's made an incredible difference to what we've been able to accomplish here in Minnesota. I'm going to start with some heavy stuff to try to give you a realistic picture of what it actually looks like here. And then we are going to move into describing the incredible organizing infrastructure that has enabled mass civil resistance to take place here in Minnesota. And be welcoming my organizer friends very soon to join me in telling this story. So we're in day 58 of a federal occupation in Minnesota. And when I say occupation, I'm not using that in a metaphorical or hyperbole type, I'm not using that language lightly or metaphorically. There are at least, we don't know how many federal troops are here, officers are here because they lie about everything. So it's hard to know, but they have surged multiple times, thousands of additional ICE and Border Patrol agents into our cities. And we know there's somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000. And just as context, the city of Minneapolis, which has been at the center of this. It's not only in Minneapolis, it's definitely in St. Paul. It sort of vibrates out from there. Minneapolis has been the epicenter, and both of the people who've been murdered lived here in South Minneapolis, where I live, but it also is reverberating out into the suburbs, first ring suburbs, where there are large immigrant populations, and then beyond that, across the state. But for context, Minneapolis has 600 police officers, and we're talking about something like 3 to 5,000 heavily armed, like armed for war, um, motorcades of masked agents who have been given complete impunity, been told that when they murder citizens, they will be immune even from investigation, let alone any kind of consequence. That's what we're living with here. And what that means, just for instance, in the week after so this began in early December, and I would say it was a smaller group of agents at that time. And what they met was an organized, sorry, what they met was an organized, really determined defiance, a commitment to defend our neighbors and to exercise our constitutional rights to observe, document, and ICE agents, and to do everything we can to create community safety in our neighborhoods. And I believe what happened is they became very frustrated at the level of citizen response that they were encountering everywhere they went. And that is why in early January, they did this massive surge of 3,000 more agents that led within 2 days to the murder of Renee Good. That also led to a huge upsurge. We already had a lot of people actively engaged in responding to this crisis. People flooded into our resistance, into our nonviolent, well-organized and disciplined resistance that is taking place across the state, but particularly here in South Minneapolis. And people did that knowing what the risks were, knowing that this actually had moved far beyond. If this was ever about immigration, if there's one thing I want you to understand today, is that this is no longer, this likely has never been about immigration. What we witnessed from the very beginning was that they don't even appear to be operating off lists of names or addresses of people that they are trying to pick up. They are indiscriminately picking people up off the streets, mostly people of color, regardless of their immigration status. They have arrested, detained, and even uh, taken people out of state. Most of the people are being taken to Texas, who are US citizens, who are green card holders, who have legal refugee status, and are in the midst of asylum claims. They have taken children as young as 2 years old. They have taken elders. They have taken Native American people. So it is completely indiscriminate. And the way they are operating has created a de facto apartheid reality in our city, where white people are somewhat free to move around the city as long as we're not directly engaging with ICE. And all people of color feel threatened, must carry documentation, and are subject to arrest at any point. And they're not, even when people provide documentation or tell them they're citizens, they are still taken, often brutalized, and taken to Whipple. Most citizens have been released, but there is no legal structure around this. They let people out in the middle of the freezing cold at Whipple they take their phones. Many of them have been brutalized, so they come out without enough clothes in this brutal weather, and this is observers as well as people they are supposedly targeting based on immigration status. And fortunately, we have organized responders at Whipple. Whipple's their staging ground and their detention center. It's a concentration camp. It is on the site. It's at Fort Snelling, which is the site where Dakota people were imprisoned before they were mass deported out of Minnesota in the 1860s. So it has tremendous symbolic and spiritual power as a place where people have been caged and imprisoned in the past. And right now, that's what that is. Um, as I was saying, fortunately, we have people who are constantly there 24/7 to assist people who are released into the cold without telephones or any way to get home. Um, okay, I want to go back to this is not about immigration. This is very clearly about our Constitution. This is about an attempt to consolidate an authoritarian regime and to test run their tactics in a free state where people are attempting to resist them. It's become really clear that this is about our First Amendment rights, suppressing our First Amendment rights, our right to free speech and assembly, our Fourth Amendment rights, which protect us from illegal search and seizure, our Second Amendment rights, as obviously they just said. I mean, whatever your feelings about the Second Amendment, they are now claiming that Alex Preddy had no right to have that gun where he had it. So, Second Amendment rights, 10th Amendment rights, which protect, which are basically states' rights to say that we have jurisdiction over our own state, which they are violating right now, and the 14th Amendment, which they are attempting to abridge, which is citizenship, right? Birthright citizenship. They are telling people, I mean, when they arrest people, they make a mistake when they're taking citizens. They are telling them there is no apology for what happens to anybody. There is no recognition. There is no record. There are no charges against the people they're arresting. They just let them go in the middle of the night sometimes. Um, what they're telling people, particularly Somali people who have been, particularly targeted by the White House, but also are less vulnerable because the vast majority of them are citizens or have legal status here. Even 50% of Somalis were born here. They are telling them, we will be back when we denaturalize you. So this kind of threat and intimidation runs throughout their operation. Um, and the amount of presence, so just one example, my husband was shoveling snow. It's also really cold here. It is snowing. It's cold, really cold. We're better at the cold than they are. So that has been a big, big advantage for us. He was shoveling snow, I think a week ago. While he was out there for like 45 minutes shoveling our steps, 3 different convoys of ICE agents came through. So they come in motorcades. They don't travel alone. They're scared. They're scared. They don't travel alone. And they are also then followed by 3 or 4 or 5 cars of observers honking their horns, blowing whistles, alerting neighbors to what's happening. What we're witnessing is not activists or people who are politically engaged only now stepping forward to defend their communities. What we're witnessing is a mass civil mobilization of a large portion of the population. So everyone that I know is now involved in some part of this resistance movement, whether they are on call for rapid response to respond to ICE when they show up, whether they are feeding people. Every single school now has a patrol of parents who are monitoring, who are there at drop off, at pickup, at recess to protect the children and their teachers. Every business has to set up a system to accompany their employees when there's a lot of Latino staff in restaurants across the cities. And so there's systems in all the commercial corridors to escort people home and to make sure they get home safely. There is diaper delivery. There is laundry being done. We have thousands and thousands of families who now are at 7 weeks of being locked in and unable to leave their homes. And that is certainly people whose status makes them more at risk, but even just most people of color do not feel safe leaving their homes. So we have thousands and thousands of people at home. We have a mass organized system to get people food, to accompany people to doctor's appointments so they can continue cancer treatment. In the schools, what we're seeing is that, like my kids' high school, about 20% of students aren't coming to school. They're doing online learning, which is not very effective, as we all know. There are schools with as many as 50 to 80% of kids out. Teachers are bringing homework, bringing computers, bringing to my kids this afternoon are going to be organizing care packages for students at a neighboring elementary school, care packages of toys for them because they've been locked in for so long. Um, so that is what is happening on the ground. And I am going to just say that the resistance we've built here in response to this threat is magical, it's powerful, it's joyful, it is fierce. I'm going to bring up a couple of pictures. We're just going to run through what it's looked like here especially the last week as we understood that although we had built this tremendous defensive infrastructure here in Minneapolis, we also needed to go on offense if we're ever going to get them out. And so 2 weeks ago, organizers began to organize for a strike and a march, which happened last Friday. And I am going to turn it over to Amelia and Doran to tell us more about the organizing that created the possibility for this mass civil resistance. I don't know if we have the pictures. I'm not seeing them. So I think we're going to go to Amelia first to talk about Amelia Avalos Gonzalez is the executive director of Unidos Minnesota. She is a brilliant and inspired leader, and Unidos created Monarca, which is a mass rapid response network for keeping our communities safe. Amelia, there you are.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and greetings from Minnesota. My name is Emilia Gonzalez Avalos, Executive Director with Unidos Education Fund, and I am also an immigrant. I was born in Mexico City and landed in Minnesota when I was 12 years old. And so this is the place that I've been most of my life. And as someone who was like a transplant from across borders, I have never been prouder to be a Minnesotan than in this moment. And so Unidos is a base building organization. We were built in Minnesota with a very generational tradition of labor empowered organization organizing. And alongside with one of our most powerful pillars, like Isaiah, we have learned the structure organizing, the math of what it means to build a base. And so I know that a lot of people have pondered the questions about decentralized movement building versus a structure organizing. And if we go in history, there's also a question about what was the hybrid organizing that people from the civil rights movement were trying to build along with the Poor People's Campaign, the at scale, big mobilization, but also leadership development that conveys. And so I never thought in a million years that I was in the opportunity to actually see what that could look like. And so I want to be very clear that a lot of the work that is possible in Minnesota is because there's been investment on people and institutions that have built an ecosystem that is now ready to plow and ready to take action, because we have created institutional on-ramps for regular people to be in the public protecting their neighbors. And the on-ramp that I want to talk to you about today is Monarca. It is a project of Unidos. It is truly a coalition of regular people that are like teachers, workers, elderly, clergy, people of faith, students, healthcare workers, you name it, who have come together to embody their First Amendment rights, to really embody their constitutional rights, but especially as legal observers under the First Amendment right. So we do mass training. The first mass training that we did in Minnesota started a year ago. We welcome over 2,000 people to that training. And ever since last year, we have cultivated a front of constitutional observers that right now are close to 28,000 people in the state of Minnesota. Without these folks, there wouldn't be the stories and the litigation and the casework that these folks can bring into the light, the evidence. The work was to bring to light the evidence of the cruelty, the evidence, and to bear witness to what it looked like on the ground and bring those protections to the places where it matters the most, on the ground in our communities with our neighbors. And so these folks not also get trained, they also learn to train others. And that's how we have been able, I mean, 28,000 is the count that we have, but we know that there is more trainings happening, that we don't have a registration, like a formal registration form. And so this, with the networks of mutual aid, the networks of activism, protest and marches, but also the actual institutional organizing, we built a firewall in our state where we're able to not just reject what's happening effectively, but also have people grounded in a peaceful, nonviolent action that can provide a path for them to think about the actual world that we want and commit to the world that we want. I'll give you an example of how beautiful regular people are showing up. I get a call every other week from a nursing home in a western suburb in Minnesota. This is a group of 5 to 7 80-plus-year-old ladies who sit down to knit and watch their shows while they assemble whistle and know your rights toolkits. Little old ladies over 80 years old are part of the people that have provided the tools for folks to use the whistles in their First Amendment rights, in their constitutional rights. They cannot go and march because they might break a hip. Some of them cannot walk outside. They cannot be gassed. They cannot be tear gas. But they sit together and assemble these kids, and they make sure to call me every other weekend so I can pick them up. And I better be on time because they just order another 1,500 kits so they can assemble together while they shuffle their cards and knit. This is the type of Minnesotan that is showing up. Students, like constitutional observers, should be 18 plus people, but there are students that are under 16 that are enraged about what's happening to their neighbors, to their classmates, to their teachers, to their families. They've been building committees so they can stage walkouts with the full conscientiousness that at some point they need to align this to a general strike, a national general strike. There are teachers running mutual aids and learning how to run DOPA clinics or become notaries so that they can also provide that same safety net for their students and their families. We have seen also conversions. I have a long history with my neighbor pastor, who is a Pentecostal conservative pastor who has now turned and said, I do not want to live in a Christian white supremacist nation. I was wrong. And I'm going to come out to the world. I'm going to talk, impress about the decisions that I made in the past. And I'm also going to run one of the largest food banks for my community because I need to help repair this. So these are the stories that happen on the ground when people are provided with the on-ramps, with the support. When you have communication vehicles and operators that can provide people with the tools so that the world can hear those stories, they can hear what they're doing. And the most important is that everybody gets to speak as a neighbor. We are not asking people to say, I'm a leader with Unidos or blah. We're saying you have to speak as a neighbor. You have to talk about the most intimate relationship with yourself and why are you coming to the public to do this caring work in very, very critical times. And so I will leave it at that. I will pass now to my colleague and sister in the struggle from Isaiah, Doran Trans, to share what are the actions and what are the other aspects of the institutional organizing that Minnesota is working on. So for sake of time, as I just want to share a little bit that the violence, there are a couple of challenges that we have right now. Yes, we were effective at demonstrating and rejecting the regime to the public. But having Volvino gone doesn't mean that the regime has to stop instigating violence in our communities. In fact, that has not changed at all. And here is Doran. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I keep jumping in and out, just like real time shit going. So my name is Doran Trantz. I am longtime organizer, leader in Minnesota. I was previously the director of Isaiah and Faith in Minnesota, and now I am all around, all in, all Minnesota, all the time. The last 6 weeks, while we fight this battle. So the big picture that I'm going to just give you a snapshot of is a relationship between the infrastructure that Amelia just described that has been built very quickly, very beautifully, very broad, like one of the most, I just want to be clear. This is the broadest, deepest civil society mobilization that I have seen or been a part of, more than COVID, more than the uprising after George Floyd. I would bet right now that 60 to 70% of the population is activated in some way. That means they are delivering food, they are helping at their school, they are in a signal chat, they are doing something that activates them into the direct work of, for lack of a better word, protecting and defending ourselves and our neighbors. So in the last, what I want to talk a little bit about is how the infrastructure, labor, faith, and community took that mobilization and build some channels for a broader based offense. So in some ways, and the work that Amelia is describing is absolutely the foundation. Like without that foundation of broad-based public support and mobilization, what I'm going to talk about would not have been possible. But that being said, we came together, labor, faith, and community organizations, in the aftermath of Renee Good's, the first assassination and murder of a Minnesotan by the hands of ICE, to say, what is it that we could do that would escalate, ramp up, and position us for like a large battle on behalf of the country that could be offensive, meaning we need an offensive battle, not just a defensive one. And together we came up with the idea to have, we called it the Day of Truth and Freedom. We never called it a general strike, but on some level, we called for a general strike. And for the broad base of people, it was about taking a day, no work, no school, no shopping, sort of broadly. And then the second piece of it was launching strategic campaigns that would target some of the most important elites who were complicit and silent to the constitutional and human rights violations that were happening on the streets, not only in the Twin Cities, but across Minnesota. Like this is literally a threat to the constitutional order of the United States, what is happening every day in Minnesota. That we needed, so we needed we need some elites like major corporations or politicians to essentially defect from their silence about what is happening. So we launched campaigns with Target, we launched campaigns with a couple of other, with Enterprise, with Hilton, to ask them to support the day, but to come out with a set of demands. That they would join us in a set of demands of the federal government. And then thirdly, we created a pathway for people of faith and conscience. We called this the Day of Prayer and Fasting, which is modeled off of the general strike that Gandhi called when they declared martial law in India. So in order to give people cover to withhold their labor and withhold their consent, he called for a day of prayer and fasting. So we kind of put those things together and launched ourselves towards January 23rd, gave ourselves 2 weeks to pull this off. So by the end of the day, we had 120 faith, community, and labor organizations who endorsed the day. We had 700 businesses who agreed to close publicly, vocally in solidarity on 123. We launched a set of direct actions in the morning. So many of you probably saw clergy getting arrested at the Minneapolis airport. We had a large picket line at the airport. We had direct occupations of the US Bank offices and the Target headquarters. We had a large march in the afternoon. The local news reported 50,000. Some local news reported 75,000. It was real big. I just want to name that it was -22 in the morning at the airport, and that people had to be outside for 4 hours to support our folks who were agreeing to engage in moral disobedience. And it was -12 during the march. So if you are outside in -12, you will get hypothermia. So the level of rage, passion, and commitment on the part of a broad base of Minnesotans was on display, not only in terms of the scale and the numbers and the support, multi-sector support, cross-sector support, but to be outside in -22 is actually a threat to your health. That I can't underscore that enough. Okay, so we did that day. And then the next morning, Alex Preddy was then murdered and executed on the streets, doing his civic duty to be a legal observer of the actions of ICE on our streets. And so those two things together, I think, absolutely have created a massive crisis for the regime. I think people are looking at the way Minnesota is engaging in a nonviolent, sort of one of the largest nonviolent strategic civil resistances that we've seen in the United States since the 1960s. And the last thing I'll say about this is the day that Alex was murdered, the kind of broad-based infrastructure that has been built activated. So more people signed up to legal observe, more people signed up to be a part of their neighbors. And then we called for a vigil on every block and every corner where people would just come out into the community, and it happened all across the state. So it's like one graphic circulated, and it was an indication of the discipline and strategy of how broad-based the discipline and strategic orientation that Minnesotans have right now, that in response to the level, heartbreaking, gut-wrenching, and enraging violence that we are seeing on our streets on behalf of the federal government, there was not a riot. No one got hurt. And in fact, thousands and thousands of people came out to do a vigil on every street corner. So that's the picture of where we at. For those of you who have thought a little bit about movement theory, I think that what we are seeing in Minnesota right now, the synthesis of institutional power, multi-sector power, and really robust block by block defense networks, movement energy, groups like Sunrise and Indivisible. What you see is a synthesis of all that infrastructure actually working in tandem to be able to play our lane and play our role in the most powerful way possible. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amelia and Doran. And I know we're all building real-time crisis as we're doing this.
Yeah.
So just want to recognize that. Alex Preddy was my neighbor, and I didn't personally know him, but he lived on the same street I do, 3 blocks down. He was the best of us, I would say. Obviously, you're all reading these incredible stories about him, that he was out observing and helping after he had he had a broken rib because ICE had tackled him and injured him earlier in the last couple of weeks. And he's a representative of thousands of other people just like him who are doing the same thing, who are standing up for their neighbors, who are courageous, even in the face of assault. And what happened to him could happen to any of us, could happen to my husband, could happen to Doran's husband, could happen to
Yes.
Amelia. Our friends and family are out there all the time. So we've decided that we're not going to back down because we can't. Um, okay, since Alex was murdered, we have seen a massive I believe that we created the container in which Alex's murder was projected much more broadly across the country and actually
Yeah.
broke through. We didn't want it. It's the word. I mean, Friday was like the peak organizing experience of most of our lives. And Saturday morning, as soon as we woke up, there was another murder right in our midst. So it was utterly devastating. And what we then saw over the weekend was that it hit harder nationally. It reached into new places. We have, it's the top issue on climber threads because he was a climber, and biker threads because he's a biker, and gun owner threads because they're asking questions about this. So we are breaking through in new ways. We know that one of the Republican candidates for office and this is just as a factual note, candidates for office on Monday morning pulled out of the race. He said he could no longer participate in what was happening. And this was a man who 2 weeks before had taken on offering legal advice to Renee Good's shooter. And now he was saying this is they are just picking up people of color. This is clearly an apartheid. He didn't use the word apartheid, but essentially he said he could no longer support what was happening and he was not going to run for governor. So those are the pillars. Those are what we call the pillars of this occupation beginning to fall and shake both locally and nationally. And so I wanted to ask Amelia and Doran to talk a little bit about that. Like, where are we with that and where are we going next?
Can I just add one little thing, which we are
Yes.
probably going to have a briefing on Friday about this, but this is this is a little top secret, but I'll give you a preview. We did a poll to try to test how widely the day of shutdown or Day of Truth and Freedom, both people were aware of it, like across the state, and also levels of participation, and also who participated. So it has the poll shows things something around 87% of people had heard of it, and 25% participated. And of the participation, there was no distinction between college and non-college educated in that participation. So this is obviously, it was like the poll was just done and we're just starting to see the results, but it will give some evidence. It's like some actual data and proof points about the broad base of participation during that day.
Did you want to say where?
So I think that for the what's next
Yeah.
is to continue to on-ramp the defense. That is an entry point for people that are consistently being politicized and grounded on the real stakes for regular people and especially about our constitutional rights. So that needs to continue, but also providing more pathways so that people can continue the path from the defense to the offense on these different activities, different paths, different targets also. Like we have a multi-target campaign right now that is institutional, but it's also federal government, but it's also some corporations, and it's also like the villains. So continuing to doing that, expanding our table with more players, and continue to partner with labor.
Great. Doran, can you talk a little bit more about the corporate campaigns that we've launched against corporations that are upholding this? Enterprise, Target, Hilton. I think it's good for people to hear and know and join us.
Yeah.
I think part of what has to happen is we need you across the country to lift up this story and to take action against these pillars. Doran.
We're building kind of like a formal cross-sector team in state. The heroic and amazing Veronica Mendez is going to play a coordinating role kind of across our movement. Many of you have heard of her or met her. She's the former director of Satul. To turn what we launched in the last couple of weeks into robust corporate campaigns. We got like a lot of people going to do sit-ins. We need like strategy. And then nationally, we have the organizations here have built like pretty robust toolkits for people across the country to be able to participate in those three campaigns. Indivisible, Mayday Strong, uh, other national configurations are amplifying and pushing out those toolkits. And then we're going to be working on creating both elite strategies, like people who know people in C-suites and things like that, but then also base strategies for people to like adopt a Target store, and here's how you could do a sit-in there, things like that. So I think it's like on the brink of becoming quite robust, both between national labor support experts and research on helping us do that, and then a local configuration that can like hold it. Um, so yeah.
Okay. So we're going to hold now on this piece. We're going to come back to some of this. We have time for Q&A at the end of our session, so we can dig more into all the questions you have, and also to talk a little bit more about the funding strategy and how, yeah.
The other thing I would name that is unfolding kind of in real time, national to state, that a lot of people could be kind of paying attention to is the potential shutdown that's going to happen on Friday. So there is also like a major strategy going on inside game with Schumer and all those people about how we're pushing for like a major line in the sand moment about ICE in Minnesota, but ICE everywhere, and DHS funding in particular, and also you like the broad public in a lot of ways is with us on this, and the polls are tanking, and people who are elected officials should not be afraid in this moment to fight ICE or DHS.
Thanks, Doran and Amelia. We are gonna, like I said, get back to Q&A at the top of the hour. But for now, I want to transfer this conversation over to Javier to talk about the Beyond Minnesota.
Yes. Thank you, Laura, Doran, and everyone. Javier Morillo, I am co-director of state programs at Movement Voter Fund, and I also am a Minnesotan. I live in St. Paul, and just as we transition to talk a little bit about the Minnesota and beyond, the why beyond. And say, as Laura said, we woke up Saturday morning after Friday being the most beautiful day I'd ever experienced in Minnesota, to the horror of another tragedy. The spontaneous demonstrations that happened across the country that evening, vigils, not just in Minnesota but elsewhere. One that I can't stop thinking about was in Boston. People gathered and they chanted, "We're not cold, we're not afraid. Minnesota taught us to be brave." And in that spirit, I want to answer the question we say, why Minnesota, right? And it's because we call this Minnesota and Beyond because we believe deeply that there are lessons that people can learn from what is happening now, but also to make the point that we have learned here in Minnesota from others. And to that point, I want to introduce Nikki Marin Baena from Siembra in North Carolina. Siembra, just to give you a sense, I recently heard Nikki speak about the work that they did when there was a surge of Customs and Border Patrol in North Carolina. And she told me about a campaign they had for businesses to declare themselves Fourth Amendment businesses. I happened to mention that to a friend here who organizes small businesses, who took off with that and signed up hundreds of businesses as Fourth Amendment businesses. I think it's like brilliantly messaged. It's a small example of like us learning from Siembra, which has an organization that has been a real resource for groups nationally. So with that, Nikki Maribena, thanks so much for joining us, Nikki.
Thank you so much, Javier, and thank you, everyone. So my name is Nikki Marimba, and I'm co-director of Siembra NC. I live in Greensboro, North Carolina. And so Siembra actually started as a community defense organization in 2017. And so a lot of the work that we were doing is during the first Trump administration, responding to immigration operations here in North Carolina. In 2019, we had what we called the big raid, which was in 10 days, Immigration and Customs Enforcement came and took over 200 people from our communities, which they said was openly in retaliation to sheriffs ending their 287G agreements. And so we learned a lot about how to set up defense networks in that time. And in preparing, what the other kind of work that we've done is around wage theft and workplace violations with Latino immigrant workers here in North Carolina. And so at the end of the 2024 election, we debriefed with our members and they were like, like some of us right now, we have bosses that are not shitty, that are actually good bosses, and our bosses are actually talking to us about what they can do to help us stay safe. Um, and so in thinking through with our members, like what are the conversations that they can be having with their bosses, we came up with the idea of the Fourth Amendment Workplace Campaign. And so this idea that government overreach through unconstitutional arrests actually doesn't just impact immigrants, it impacts everyone in a community. And so employers, business owners, bosses are also impacted by this government overreach. And so uh, we started to do these Fourth Amendment workplace canvases. People started to volunteer and get involved. And the other thing that had happened in 2025 is that we actually met people from groups like Isaiah and Unidos and learned a lot more about how to have more containers and more structures so that we could bring more people in faster into our organizing work. And so I wanted to name that too because there is a way that the learning just keeps kind of cycling around. And because we were so inspired by Isaiah, we actually started to try to have more relationships with faith communities and different people in North Carolina who are in faith communities. And so throughout this last year, there was a group, we'd been tracking that detentions were higher in Mecklenburg County than they were in other parts of the state. Mecklenburg County is where Charlotte is. And so we've been tracking that immigration detentions there had been higher than anywhere else in the state all throughout 2025. And we started to be in conversation with some Methodist pastors in Mecklenburg County, and they were saying, hey, we have congregants that are afraid to come to services because they're afraid that they won't get home safely. And so we started to talk with them about the idea of having a safe to school, safe to work patrol training. And so we were talking about this kind of like, yeah, we'll do that in a few months. And so we set up a date to do the first two of those trainings, November 15th and November 17th of 2025. And then shortly before those trainings were going to take place, a week before, we all started to get news that Border Patrol was going to be arriving in North Carolina. And so we had these trainings already set up. And all of a sudden we had like 400 people at these trainings at these churches in Charlotte because they had already been set up, but here now is the thing was really happening. Border Patrol was really touching down in North Carolina. And so when we were preparing to give these trainings, we were like a lot of the basics of defense trainings are kind of the same in many places, I think, at this point. So what we were saying was, okay, if you just have two people, the most important thing for you to do is document. We've just seen that in Chicago, a judge ruled that they had to let all these people out because it was proven that these were unconstitutional arrests because someone recorded them. And so we think it's really important to actually document them, even if it feels helpless in the moment that you're watching this detention happen, because we might be able to use that recording later. And then we were saying the second most important thing, so if you have more than two people, if you have four people, the first two should document and the second two should alert the perimeter. And so they should let everybody around that they're federal agents and there's an operation happening. And then I had this really strong sense as we were kind of processing that Border Patrol was coming in from outside of North Carolina. We are Southern organizers. And I was like, I want us to sing them out of town. And so what we said is if you have four or more people, you should sing. And the song that we came up with, just because at the time I was like, whatever, it's a song everybody knows. the song we came up with was This Little Light of Mine. And so when we gave the training, that was the song that we had it, and we did the whole role play. So we had like people wearing the face coverings and pretending to detain people and had people actually do all the roles. Um, and got people singing This Little Light of Mine. Um, and we did I watched a video of someone new giving the training a few days later, and they were actually telling the whole story of why This Little Light of Mine is a really important song in Black civil rights history in the South. And so I was like, oh yeah, that's right. That's also true. And so that we were able to kind of really quickly actually take these learnings and put them together into this is what we did when Border Patrol showed up in our town toolkit, and we were able to share it with other people. But for us, our operation was much shorter, obviously, than what happened in Minnesota. But in a 2 week period of time, 7,800 people took 2 actions with us. And those are the people that we can track. We know that our friends at Public School Strong trained another 3,000 people. And we know that people were getting trained all day long in parking lots across North Carolina. And so the expanse of it is probably much bigger. And so like we owe a lot to folks like Isaiah for teaching us about how to make our structures bigger so that we could bring more people in. The one other thing I want to say, just to echo Lara's point from the beginning, is, this is not about immigration. And I think that that's something that we have felt for a long time. And I think I'm in Greensboro, where the state's role in the Greensboro massacre is well documented. And I think about the 43 students from Ayotzinapa, and I think the first thing I thought when I saw how the government was talking about Alex Preddy was actually my family is from Colombia, and there was a scandal called the false positives scandal, where the government, the army, and their associated paramilitary groups lured poor people into remote areas and then killed them and then dressed them up as guerrilleros to inflate the numbers of uh, guerrilla members that they had killed. Um, and we're now, that peaked between 2006 and 2009, and there are still court cases about this that are happening. And so I think we are in this moment in history, and I think it's really important for us to think together about what roles we will take and kind of how this all plays out so that we make it right. And so I am really inspired by the work in Minnesota and by seeing even our North Carolina senators like Tillis and Budd having to make statements about how concerned they are about what ICE is doing. And I think we have a long way to go to actually connect how this is both not about immigration, but still very much about immigration. But those are the thoughts I'll leave you all with, and thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Nikki. We really appreciate it. And I have, since I first heard you say it, just carry with me, we will sing ICE out. We will sing ZVP out of our states. And again, Minnesota and beyond, because we have to be ready. We have to be ready for what it's like to run elections in cities that are under military occupation. That's why this is relevant beyond uh, uh, just what's happening right now. Now, I want to pass it over to Kofi Wade from Solidaire.
Thank you. So good to be with everyone. And I'll be real quick because want to make sure there's time for questions to be answered. My name is Kofi, use they, them pronouns. I'm based in Los Angeles, and I'm stewarding Solidarity Network's Movement Protection Fund. Movement Protection Fund has been in connection with many Minnesota groups, but also throughout 2025 and really near the end of 2024. While ICE has been on a reign of terror tour from Los Angeles to Chicago, Boston, Minnesota right now, and the role that we're playing in connection with Solidarity members who are really helping to sustain this fund. Amazing members like Laura is one, responding to urgent security needs, but also looking beyond the crisis, right? And so, what does it look like to support groups who are building emergent infrastructure, but also long-term infrastructure? And what we're seeing and what Minnesota is truly exemplifying is the coordination that is happening between groups, right? And some of the infrastructure that really emerged in 2020 that was reactivated right at the end of 2025 based on conversations I've been having with folks. And so I would say right now, as the map of ICE's movement continues to expand, we know and what the through line in conversations with frontline movement providers and folks who are tracking groups like Equality Labs and Public Research Associates is that there's a through line of targeting areas that have larger Somali communities. And so prior to 2025, we were connecting with folks in Minnesota who were bracing for what is to come, but also groups in San Diego, connecting with groups in Maine and Ohio. And I would say, rapid response funding is always necessary. And just as we've heard from Laura, from Amelia, from Nikki, from Doran, right, is that the infrastructure piece really needs to be highlighted. And so different areas of work when we're considering safety and security infrastructure, that includes legal defense. And within that is always trainings, right? But many groups, I think for us, movement work is important, and safety and security has always been within the fabric of movement work, always, right? And so, if there are funders, I'm assuming there are funders on this call, right? As you're in relationship with your grantees or movement partners, being in these conversations right away around what are their needs around safety and security. If they have an attorney on retainer, right, for their members or for the work that they're doing, how they're making sure they're able to resource both the trainings, right, of many community members, what that means after the fact, if those trainings are translating into a hotline and who's operating those hotlines, as well as digital security. The legacy of the Movement Protection Fund is named after Janisha R. Gabriel, and really the heart of it is, you know, in folks in the funder world, yes, it's important to resource the movement work and the organizing, and it's also critically important to take care of the folks who are leading the work, to take care of the folks who are putting their bodies on the line. And as we're seeing in Minnesota, community members who are coming out, right, doing legal defense, the two executions that happen, right, we also need to make sure that folks have digital security, knowing that the more visible you are, right, the doxing is rampant. And so, what are the even basic levels of security infrastructure that community members can be offered? And community members, this includes organizations. We've heard folks name labor, and also many of the conversations I'm having, particularly with folks within the Somali community, is the targeting of childcare centers. And this is from San Diego and Minnesota. It's schools and it's childcare centers that aren't corporate or chained, right? But mom and pop childcare centers. And so these different areas, I'm naming these areas as far as legal defense, as far as digital security, physical safety, right? How folks can protect themselves as they're doing the legal observations, and what are the security protocols? There's infrastructure, and then there's really the need to boost and invest in the training around security culture. As we've heard, a lot of infiltration in different signal threads. So those two keeping together, the infrastructure, but also the culture of security that communities are building within each other. And mutual aid is also a part. So when we think about safety and security, yes, it's the training, it's the legal observer, but for us, we like to, it's important to hold safety and security in a holistic way. And so safety and security also means, like was said on the call, mutual aid, right? If folks have been um, kept in their houses, not able to go to work, many folks losing jobs. Now housing is becoming threatened, right? Housing security, safety and security is care, and it's holistic, right? And so, I would encourage to to be in conversation with all your grantees because it's coming to all of our doors. So no matter where you are, yes, pour into Minnesota and also begin these conversations with folks you're in relationship with, right? And to really invest not in isolation, but really we know that relationship is an incredible aspect of infrastructure. Relationship is infrastructure. Relationship is also power, as Minnesota is showing us in many other places, right? And relationship is also capacity building, right? And it's safety. It's how we build and strengthen our sense of safety is through relationships. Relationships that also, are values aligned and also have that element of security culture. And so we're moving resources very quickly to Minnesota, but also looking ahead and also continuing to cross-pollinate between Chicago and Minnesota, between San Diego and Minnesota, between Boston, right? These aren't isolated, and this is really a sacred weaving that is happening right now. And so I want to leave that there. Um, and reach out if you have questions, MPF at solidarnetwork.com. And really, in asking questions, ask at what scale, right? Many times rapid response funding comes, and it's not a small number. 10K is not a small number. And hearing the scale at which the work is happening, we also need to step in and meet the braveness of folks who are on the front line with the braveness of the resources that we're making sure that both are taken care of and the work is supported.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kofi. And really, thank you, Amelia, Doran, Laura, Javier, Nikki, and Kofi for sharing why organizing is the key to standing up to ICE occupation in all of our cities. We all have so much to learn. And so thank you to all of you for joining this briefing. Thank you to those of you who have supported the Movement Voter Fund, Rapid Response Fund. We've already deployed $750,000 to grassroots organizations in Minnesota, and we're planning to ramp up a second round and also support organizers wherever the next crisis is. And as we close, I'd love to pass back to Malachi, to our incredible host at Solidaire.
Well, I'm just going to say thank you for staying over. It has been a true honor to be moving a huge amount of resources right to the ground for people who need it for legal support, for mental health services, for relocation because they are being threatened in their homes. We are showing up for the people who are working for peace and justice, and it is such an honor. So thank you for being part of that beloved community, and thank you for coming today.
Great, thank you so much. And so now we're gonna, this is so much bigger than Minnesota. If you have questions, this is a good time to ask them. And so I think we are going to re-enable the chat, and we are going to have a few of our experts stay on to answer questions. So if there's let's maybe start. I would actually love to start with Joe's question. And so Laura, if you're on deck, hearing Laura and Doran speak, it's clear that the entire area is deeply traumatized by the experiences of the last 2 months. Can you speak to the mental health services and how people are dealing with this combination of anger, grief, and probably a million other emotions that people are feeling in the Twin Cities and across Minnesota?
Yeah, wow. So, you know, we are basically an unarmed population in a wartime mobilization. That's what it is. And I think most of us are going to need help afterwards. But right now, it's day to day, minute to minute. Some of the things I don't think the mental health resources are there to answer the needs of masses of people. What I can say is that being in community is really powerful and is the most healing thing that we can do. I know for myself, after I heard that Alex had been murdered. I was pretty immobilized and devastated and couldn't continue to act. But I went to, there was a church service with this, there's a whole network called, to Nikki's point about singing them out of town. So there's a network now called Singing Resistance, which has 4,000 people organized on signal threads that have been doing singing actions across the cities at vigils and in different moments, and they're sort of self-organizing into pods of singers. So they had a pre-planned event at the church to raise money for rent. Rent is due tomorrow. It's February or today, I don't know, February 1st is very soon. Rent is due. Thousands of people can't pay it. So they were raising rent for people who are locked in. And there were over 1,000 people and then an overflow room just at this one church. And they taught us songs. And the songs are a way that taught us songs that we would then take into community and into the vigils that evening. They're simple songs, but they were sort of like, I feel the grief move through my body. Um, so the singing itself is a somatic release, and I would say that it stabilized me that day to be in community with 1,000 people holding candles and singing together. So I would say that those, and then that night, we were all on the corners, as Dorn was explaining, about 30 of us on the corner here. And, there were people everywhere. My direct corner, there were 30 of us with candles, and we sang together. We hugged each other. We cried together. My neighbor across the street broke down sobbing. She's terrified for her partner, who's Asian. She's a college professor, and they are not immigrants. And she's sobbing in my arms because she's terrified for her partner. She doesn't want him to go out at all. He disguises himself when he goes out, just to underline the depth of this and how far this is reaching into all parts of our community. So I would say it is the real time enactment of those kind of care, things that have brought me back to myself. Yesterday, two friends, actually Solidaire members, brought me a home baked pie. So that is how we are. I would say we are breaking every day and then patching ourselves back together. We're going to need mental health resources on the other side of this for sure.
Definitely, and it's such a good reminder that taking action together is one of the most healing things that we all can do. I'm going to read a few of these questions from the Q&A box. Are the Hmong, Karen, Burmese, Cambodian, and other Southeast Asian community groups being served in the mutual funds being raised? Has there been conversation about making Stephen Miller more of a central target given the key role that he plays? There are a few related questions related to the Day of Action, which organizations are joining together to learn from the success of Minneapolis's general strike, replicate it elsewhere than nationally. How do we connect a national network of businesses? Those are 3 questions, and then I can move on to another set of questions.
Let me just start with among Karen and Southeast Asian communities. So especially, Twin Cities, but especially St. Paul has very large Southeast Asian immigrant communities. Or actually, most Hmong people also were born here. They have been here for a very long time. Despite that, there have been reports of ICE going house to house and asking people where the Asian people are and arresting Hmong elders, people. It's across the board. Karen, refugees who are people from Myanmar and can't be, like over 100 of them have been detained that we know of and are in Texas. So this is hitting across those communities. The MVP is moving this money this week to an organization called MN8, which is an immigrant organization working with Southeast Asian refugees and immigrants, and Monarca. And there is a vast network of mutual aid and support across the whole Twin Cities. There are lots of different organizations. I would also recommend for people looking for more particular organizations to resource to, you can look at standwithminnesota.org, which is a vast list of community funds and organizations. All of the organizations that MVP supports will be on that list, but also it goes beyond that into resourcing of hyper-local communities. So that's on that. Stephen Miller, yes, absolutely. I mean, I would ask you, I would actually throw it back to you. Like yes, absolutely. I think the moment is ripe, right? We actually brought down Bonino, I mean, he's an idiot and whatever, but it's still a win and we have to take it. It looks like Kristi Noem is in the crosshairs. She is now saying, well, he's the one who told me to say all these things. So the moment is ripe to try to put a wedge between Trump and Miller. So I would really throw that back to all of you and your organizations and your work across the country to make that the demand that he has to go. He is responsible for this ethnic cleansing campaign that's happening across the country, but most direly here in Minnesota. Um, I think there was another set of questions about other organizations spreading this across the country. So I think we're in an emergency. We heard this morning that arrest warrants have been issued for people leading the Observer networks. We're waiting to see what's going to happen with that. So I think I would ask you all to be on standby for what happens with that. We're in an emergency situation. We are trying as much as we can to share our learnings and resources with organizations across the country. A lot of it is publicly available. This is not secret. Like there's kits, there's trainings, and people are doing this. Like I know on just after the general strike on Friday or over the weekend, Indivisible had an online training for how to be an observer, and there were over 100,000 people on there. So clearly people are hungry for this information, and a lot of infrastructure is being set up in real time. I think probably the most important thing that we are doing is providing an example of courage, which is contagious. And I can feel and see that people in other communities are picking that up and understanding that they too are called to answer in this moment. Is there maybe give me another more specific question, Beth, so I can't
Yes,
remember the other
definitely.
one. Yeah.
How do shareholders of corporations take action? And then are people seeing or calling for local government involvement, intervention, or support? Interested in calling ours in as we prep for what's next.
Yes, I think there's a lot of things. I mean, somebody had also asked how were local electeds responding here. So let me take those two things together. There's a lot. I mean, so a whole set of our elected leaders are on the streets every single day with us, and they're doing briefings, daily briefings on what is happening in their city wards, in their legislative districts. So there's a whole set of legislators who are very deeply involved, not just in the city, but like Brad Tapke out in Shakopee has organized. He's leading a whole observer network. Oh, an incredible thing happened over the weekend in Shakopee. They were planning to bring an ICE facility. They were on the verge of building an ICE facility out there in the suburbs, and they actually blocked it this weekend directly as a result of this upsurge of civic engagement around ICE and just how terribly unconstitutional their actions are. So things like that, are there ICE centers in your community? Can they be shut down? What legal statutes exist right now? Minneapolis law enforcement is not allowed to cooperate with ICE in the sense of supporting their immigration activities. Minneapolis police are not legally allowed to participate in any of that activity. And so what we've seen is the police are very kind of absent from this entire dynamic that I've been describing. They will come for crowd control, and a couple of times they have been called in a way that felt like they were there to protect ICE, but that's also highly controversial. So this is like a contested piece of what is happening. But I don't think most cities have statutes like that prevent ICE from directly cooperating prevent local authorities from directly cooperating. We do. That's been somewhat protective. It's also part of why the Trump administration is so furious. That is one of their demands, that we stop all of that. So I think all of those things, getting those things in place in your community really, really do matter. But
and that really ties in.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I think that really ties into what Doran was sharing about the ecosystem-wide, infrastructure-wide approach and synthesizing all of the different types of organizing, that everyone has a lane. And so one question that I wanted to lift
the
up
shareholder
is,
question.
Oh, sure. How can shareholders
Yeah.
of corporations take action?
So I don't have like everything at my fingertips right now. So what I'm going to say is that the corporations that are at the top of the list for us are Target, because it is a large corporation headquartered in Minneapolis, thousands of employees here. Those employees have already written a letter on Friday. Part of the strike actions, there's a letter from hundreds of Target employees calling on Target to call for ICE to leave. They have also, ICE has been using their parking lots to launch from, and on video, ICE arrested and detained 2 American citizen minors who were employees of Target, and they arrested them in the lobby of the store. And Target hasn't even issued a statement on their behalf. So I would say Target, both because of its importance as a civic, it's like they're just embedded in the Twin Cities in a very deep way. Like, so the Target Center is our stadium. They are one of the largest corporations here. So Target, but then so if you are a Target shareholder, I would look into ways to have organized shareholder actions. I personally don't have at my fingertips how to do that, but we know that shareholder activism has been really valuable in other movements and times. The second corporation I will call your attention to is Enterprise Car Rental. So about half the cars being rented to ICE are from Enterprise. I understand that it's a privately held company headquartered in St. Louis, and that's basically a family. That makes them possibly a more likely target for us to put pressure on them, especially in St. Louis, where they are sort of like what Target is here, they are that in St. Louis. So that would be a really important place to take action. I think shareholder action on Enterprise would also matter. Hilton hotels. So it's like, how are they moving? How are they sleeping? How are they eating? Hilton hotels, because that's been one of the main places they are. People have been taking noise actions at the hotels where ICE is. They're actually in all the hotels. The hotels are full, and they're full of ICE, and they are arresting hotel workers while they're staying there. So it is a wild situation, but I think at some point these hotels have to be pressured to end their contracts with ICE and federal agents in general. And I think shareholder would be a very important lever to push.
Definitely. And we will share a document about corporate campaigns and how you can take action in the chat in a moment.
Thank you.
There was a question about Maine. Any advice on that? We need to be better coordinated and streamlined here in Maine. And I'm just going to read out one of the responses from my colleague Annie. Movement Voter Fund is sending rapid response funds to Maine and working closely with their organizers on the ground, thanks to our Maine state advisor, Tony Mack, who is very plugged in there. Yeah. And so one question is, are folks, is the call for a national general strike coming from Minnesota organizers?
I don't think so, but it doesn't mean we're opposed to it. I don't know that it's quite reached that level yet. Pulling off a general strike here last Friday was the lift of a lifetime. So if national organizers can relieve us of some of that pressure, that would certainly help. I feel like that wasn't a great answer. Yeah, we need a national strike, and it's probably not going to be one. it takes a while to build muscle. We never called for a general strike. That's another thing. I don't think people should call for a general strike. That doesn't work. You have to organize it. We called for a day of truth and freedom. Unions joined on, more and more and more. Stores started announcing they were joining, and it became a general strike or close to a general strike. Definitely here in Minneapolis, it was extremely, extremely effective. So I think it has to grow and build. And if you call for it, and it fails, it just you look kind of ridiculous. And so I think there has to be enough momentum on the ground, and so I think we will know that as a people when it's coming. But I do think that we built some muscle here in Minnesota that it can happen, and it can happen pretty quickly.
Okay, I'm definitely missing some of the questions that are in the chat, not the Q&A box. Sorry about that. One question that is in the Q&A box is we could use insight into the practicalities of organizing patrols, rapid response, and more.
The practicalities?
This up? Yeah. Is anyone writing up this into some kind of report out? I know you all have been quite busy and probably have not written.
There are many, many toolkits that are available, and MVP could possibly lead people to where those have been gathered. And some of those toolkits came out of DC, they came out of Chicago, how to organize a school patrol, how to organize a signal chat, how to do this. And what I want to emphasize is that the organizations like Monarca created this incredible training, shared training across thousands of people so that we have a consistent understanding of our rights, what we're able to document and what we can't, and a commitment to nonviolence. And to not actually, we are not saying we're trying to intervene. We're documenting, observing, and keeping communities safe. But ICE whistles and telephones are much more powerful than you think. So using them works. ICE does not they like to grab someone when they're alone and just take them. They don't love, even though they're doing it obviously in this brutal way, but more times than not, they actually flee. So that's what we have experienced. So Monarca is really important. Having this training, having as many people trained as possible matters. You need maybe a core group trained, but after that, people are training each other because we can't, our organizing can't scale at this, it only scales if people start training each other. And then the signal chats, the signal groups were created spontaneously by people in hyper-local, like neighborhood by neighborhood. And they are somewhat unvetted, which is why we've had infiltration. But that is sort of goes without saying. Nothing that we're doing is illegal. So we're doing all of this openly and we're inviting neighbors in. And what makes it possible is relationships. So the more that you are already networked with the local coffee shop and the other parents at your school and your unions and neighborhood organizations, all of these things are what allowed us to quickly build up this infrastructure. We did have a tremendous advantage that a lot of these groups of WhatsApp chats and neighborhood committees had already been formed after 2020. And so all of that because we had to defend our neighborhoods in 2020 during the uprising. And so we were able to relatively quickly put that together. Elected officials have also been a part of organizing this structure. The fact that it's decentralized is protecting us. There is not one person they can arrest to destroy this network of community response. I think they're going to try, but there is and I think a lot of us are realizing that so yesterday they said there's a database. I mean, when we observe, they're taking our pictures and they're taking pictures of our license plates and they are compiling that into what they call some kind of database. They've turned to people, taken their picture and said, congratulations, you're a domestic terrorist. You're in the database. And I think what we realize is that we want as many of us in that database as possible. That's really the only protection. If there are so many of us that they cannot pick off a few of us. So I don't know if that helps you understand the practicalities of this, but I think Coffee said it. Relationships are at the heart of this. The stronger they are before we go into it, the more likely we are to create to win, to be able to stand up to this. So organize in your church, organize in your schools, organize wherever in the cafes. I mean, the businesses in Minneapolis now are many of them are mutual aid centers. I mean, small businesses, not corporations. Small businesses are mutual aid centers. They're places for observers to gather, to spend time together. Even during the strike, many of them stayed open for people to come get coffee and be together and be in community. And that's been just like an amazing response across the cities. Like at the donut shore, the donut shop where the donut shop where the second murder took place is the donut shop I take my kids to, have taken my kids to all my life, all their lives. It's a complete mutual aid center at this point, and so are the other businesses right next door to it.
Absolutely. And so let's end with this question from Pancho. Any advice on how existing base building organizations that are involved in the resistance can also take advantage of this moment to build their base in leadership? What you're doing describes this in many ways, but do you have any ideas about what to do after the most intense moment passes to the social, most intense moment passes? So I'll have I might also call in Billy Wimsett to give a response to this question, but Laura, do you have thoughts about how existing base building organizations can make the most of this moment?
Yeah, and then I also feel like we should close with money. We should talk about money because that's what MVP does. So let's also do that. I would say this is the organizing opportunity of your lifetimes. That's what you should look at it as. You can, if you call a meeting about neighborhood defense and community defense, if that is somewhere within your remit, which I would say for all of us at this point it is. This is about the Constitution. This is about defending our neighbors. It's pretty simple. Thousands of people are likely to show up. And then the question is, how are you integrating them over a longer term into organizing? But organizers know how to do that. So I trust they will do it. Do you want to go back to money questions, Billy?
Go for it. And I think we have a slide so people can see. But I just want to say there's someone asking in the chat, like, I thought you guys were talking about like changing the media and like nothing has changed the media more than what has happened in Minnesota. It's like on Saturday we woke up and the idea that the Senate was going to contest anything was completely off the table. And by the end of the day, the Senate is like, we're not doing DHS funding. You know, that like this is the local organizing has completely changed the media environment. So I just
yeah, and I mean
back to you, Beth.
the NRA is wobbling right now on this because of the gun ownership question. The Minnesota gun owners, they had a press conference denouncing the murder. I mean, so we are changing the national narrative in real time as we speak. And I think that the murder of Alex Pretty on Saturday was like the match, but we had created the conditions in which that match could truly be struck. I mean, it really mattered that the national media was here for the strike. So then they immediately amplified what happened with the murder. So just the shift from Saturday to today feels pretty. We know the Trump administration right now is back. They're on their back foot. They feel defensive. They know they have to change strategy. They haven't done it, change strategy on the ground here in Minnesota, but they are feeling it. So now is the time to push.
Yeah, and just shout out because we're almost at the end of time to all our donor organizing allies in this work that have shown up so beautifully. Resource Generation, Pro Democracy Center, Way to Rise, and just huge Women Donors Network, and just Democracy Alliance, and just huge shout out to Solidaire and the incredible role that y'all have played with the Movement Protection Fund and just be meta organizing with all of us and this is just a time, that we just all have to step up. Like our country is on the brink. We're at a crossroads, and this is the time. Thank you for lifting up leadership, Alba. This is a time for all of us to be our biggest, best, bravest selves. Because the only thing that's going to protect us is a lot of people doing this, and that is why we support organizing. And because it's about organizing many, many, many people to do this with us. So we're not alone. And so we're building beloved community as Solidaire talks about. So
I'm so grateful to MVP and to Solidaire. 2 weeks ago, I was like, people here asked me, Laura, you got to organize the money for this as they were trying to do the strike and the response. And I reached out to Billy and he said, we got you. And I was like, we part of the reason these national institutions are really important is we don't want to necessarily be putting the names of individual organizations broadly out there. So they're actually helping, and everybody on the ground here is completely overwhelmed and in mobilization mode. So it actually really helps to have people at MVP and people at Solidaire to be talking to donors, bringing in resources, and then bringing in both the organizing money, which is what we're getting from MVP, and the safety and security money, which is what we're getting from Solidaire. So those two arms are absolutely critical to winning here on the ground in Minnesota. And I know MVP is a electoral organization. So I will just say what happens in Minnesota here is going to shape the conditions of elections in the fall.
well,
Absolutely.
this is a call. This is just I just want to end on the note that this is a nonpartisan call.
Well, but we still would like to have elections.
MVF. Oh yeah, we need to. That is a nonpartisan thing that we should have elections.
We should have elections in the fall.
We should have elections in the fall, and Movement Voter Fund as a nonpartisan organization is let's work together to get Minnesota all the money they need to do their best work and be protected through these three different channels and have enough resources to support in Maine, in Arizona, in North Carolina, in all the places that this is popping off. So thank you all
Great.
so much
Everyone.
for your
Thank you for joining us. And thank you, Laura, so much for your courage, your leadership, your humanity, and for all of you who have hung on to the 92nd minute of this call. I certainly
Y'all
hope
are
that
heroes. Thank you.
I hope that you see yourself, your courage, your humanity and leadership in what Laura is sharing. This is the organizing moment of our lifetimes, and I hope that we all treat it this way. So thank you, Laura. Thank you, Solidaire. Thank you to my colleagues at Movement Voter Fund, and we will talk soon.